You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and let's start with the 2015 murders of 69-year-old Bud Runyon and his wife, 66-year-old June Runyon, and the new and crucial evidence that was discovered by a fisherman last week. But let's refresh everyone's memory of the tragic Craigslist murder before we dive into the new evidence. L. Ray Runyon, or Bud as he was commonly known, was on the hunt for a vintage car, specifically a 1966 Ford Mustang. Bud had owned a 66 Mustang shortly after returning from serving in the Vietnam War, and he wanted a cherished memory to come back to life. It was early 2015. So he did a very 2015 thing, and he placed an "in search of" ad on Craigslist. It wasn't long before Bud was contacted by a potential seller, but it was going to require him to make a drive to check out his desired vintage car purchase because the seller was located in the South Georgia town of McRae. So Bud and his wife June got in their champagne-colored GMC Envoy, and they made the nearly 180-mile trek from their suburban home in Atlanta to meet the man supposedly selling that Mustang. Once the couple reached the area of McRae, the seller and Bud talked on the phone, and that's the last anyone heard from Bud or June, despite them having cell phones and chargers with them. The two were reported missing by their daughter when they didn't show up to babysit their grandchildren, and authorities began searching for Bud and June. But it wasn't until someone found their car submerged in a small pond that Bud and June were found a short distance away, both shot in the head. And this is where Jay enters the story. In that January of 2015, a young man named Ronnie Adrian Towns, who, like Bud, has a name that everyone calls him. He goes by Jay. Well, Jay Towns was unemployed. He had just lost his job at a tree removal business near his hometown that was about 75 miles southeast of Macon, Georgia. And law enforcement contend that Jay was desperate for cash. He has a wife and a young daughter that he needs to be providing for. Law enforcement also say Jay was the last person to speak with Bud. Authorities homed in on Jay early. At first, when they questioned him, they told him they were looking at him for theft. It wasn't the first time they looked at him for theft either. Law enforcement had questioned Jay in other robberies, but they'd yet to be able to arrest him. Now, following the first interview with Jay, law enforcement gained more information, and then they started to search for Jay again, saying they were seeking him for making a false statement in his first interview. And Jay was running. According to his father, he was hiding in the woods near his hometown. His father did convince Jay to turn himself in, and that's when Jay's world will never be the same. 3 months after his arrest in April of 2015, Jay was standing in a jail jumpsuit next to his lawyer and before a judge in his bond hearing. And he had a crowd. 4 dozen of his friends and family were in the courtroom. His brother and his father, well, they were there, and they were his biggest supporters, saying that Jay was a good kid and that accusing Jay of the killings just didn't make any sense. At that hearing, the assistant district attorney argued for no bond, saying Jay was a flight risk. The assistant DA cited that Jay had tried to elude capture in those early days of the discovery of Bud and June being murdered. Remember, he fled to the woods. And then some of the evidence against Jay seemed really damning. For instance, he had possession of a burner phone, even though he had another personal cell phone. And the assistant DA contended that Jay had used that burner phone to communicate with Bud in order to lure him to the rural Georgia area, then allegedly shooting both Bud and June while robbing them. Now, the assistant DA said Jay was also in contact with other potential buyers off of Craigslist, that Jay's actually lying about having the items they desired, and that Jay was manufacturing meet-up scenarios where he could rob the potential buyers. And then there was another thing. The bodies of Bud and June were found within a mile of Jay's childhood home. That home was part of a farm that was located beside a long dirt road. The farm grew soybeans and cotton and peanuts. And Jay had been recently staying at that home with his family due to his financial difficulties. Well, at that time, Jay was just 28 years old when the bond hearing occurred. And it's 2015, remember? And a trial has still yet to occur for the Georgia native who has been behind bars ever since his arrest. Jay turned 37 last November. Okay, so what's the delay? Why has one man been locked up for more than 9 years without facing a jury? Well, part of the answers lie in the fact that prosecutors have, since day one, said they were seeking the death penalty for Jay, which that always extends a case far past what you or I would consider swift justice. Just think back to one of the current cases that we're following. Chad Daybell in Idaho has spent 4 years in jail and is finally facing a jury for his capital punishment case. Another reason for the delay? Jay's initial indictment was thrown out. In late 2015, a grand jury indicted Jay on capital murder charges. But Jay's attorney contended that the jury selection process was flawed, which was, in his words, a violation of Jay's civil rights. So here's what happened. 50 prospective jurors were summoned for the jury selection process. Of those 50, only 16 showed up. I am so shocked by this, and maybe I shouldn't be, but it just seems like such a small amount would actually fulfill their civic duty. I've been called and questioned for jury duty twice, and nearly everyone that was listed on that jury sheet, well, they all showed up. But in this county, only 16 of the 50 felt a need to do their public service. And to be fair, 25 of the jurors had been excused because serving wasn't possible for them at that time. But that leaves 9 no-shows. So the judge said, fine those 9 no-shows. He also said that the court could take from the jury pool that was supposed to be questioned the very next day for a completely different case. But that's where the problem arises. The other potential jurors from the selected jury pool that was occurring the next day, well, they weren't chosen at random. The court clerk and chief deputy examined the list, and on their own, they identified 4 jurors to summon from that list. You guys, that's a big no-no. It's supposed to be random. 2 of those 4, well, they couldn't come that day. But the 2 others did show up. And these potential 2 jurors had the initials TS and BW. And guess what? TS was chosen and named as the foreperson for the grand jury for Jay. So a hand-picked juror is now the leader of the grand jury. Okay, all of this came to light 2 years after the initial indictment, and Jay's attorneys filed for the indictment to be thrown out. That motion was granted, but the district attorney turned around and attempted to indict Jay again via another grand jury in 2019, and he was successful. But then COVID-19 hit, and the trial was delayed even further. Since the initial arrest in 2015, the DA has been working on building a case against Jay. And until last week, indications were that Jay would be headed to trial somewhere near August of this year. But then all of that might have changed because a magnet fisherman has uncovered some potential evidence in the case. On April 14th, a magnet fisherman was working along Horse Creek. Now, the treasure hunter, we call him a fisherman, but he's in water with a magnet, so that's why they call him a fisherman, but he's actually looking for treasures. Well, that treasure hunter, he found a .22 caliber rifle, and cops soon realized that the gun was the same type of gun used in the 2015 murders of Bud and June. Now, finding the gun really didn't mean that much to the magnet fisherman. He just turned it over, and then he went back to searching the area for treasures the very next day. And that's when he found a cell phone, credit cards, and driver's licenses that belonged to Bud and June. When asked about the potential new evidence, District Attorney Tim Vaughn said he had a good case before the new evidence was found. He said the gun and personal items will make for an even better case. Now, the personal items also were the spur for a granted search warrant of a Telfair County home. Authorities said more evidence was recovered in that home, but they've not hinted as to what those items might be. So I'll keep watching this case and report for you as the trial potentially edges closer to a late summer or early fall start time. We may not know the guilt or innocence of Jay yet, but we can recognize the loving and service-oriented couple. Bud and June were renowned for their community service and for repairing bikes for local children in need. Each Christmas, they embarked on a charitable journey, distributing gifts to Appalachia's underprivileged youngsters from their Marietta church. This all according to the church pastor, Mark Walker. Bud and June had been married for 38 years. They were the parents of 3 daughters and grandparents to 3 grandchildren. Let me just share 2 of the dozens and dozens of tributes left on Bud and June's obituary page. The first read like this: Mrs. Runyon was my 2nd grade teacher at Harmony Leyland. I had her during the 1975-76 school year and remember her as Mrs. Mangum. She was a very caring and sweet lady. Mr. and Mrs. Runyon impacted so many lives through giving of their time and money to people that they knew and that they didn't know. I was very blessed to have Mrs. Runyon as my teacher and will never forget her. Praying for the family that the Lord will give them strength and a sense of peace in the days ahead. I am so sorry for your loss. Please know that many are praying for you. Well, the second tribute references Bud by the nickname Sarge, which I would just guess comes from his military service. And here's how that tribute reads. These 2 loving people will be greatly missed. I worked with Sarge for many years through Bell South, and after he retired, he was as dedicated to his work as he was to his ministry and the kids and his family. And now, a 55-year-old man in Washington has been sentenced for trying to kill his wife by burying her alive. Che Kayan An and 44-year-old Young Suk An had a family together, kids and a marriage in Thurston County, but that marriage had been rumored to involve domestic violence. Marital bliss just wasn't happening, and the 2 had separated and were working on a divorce. Back in late October of 2022, Young had returned home from church on a Sunday to find that her estranged husband, Che, was in her home. Fearing what was about to happen, Young sent her children to a neighboring home. And the conversation between Young and Che, well, that day centered around their pending divorce. As the emotions began to elevate, Che told Young that he would rather kill her than give her his retirement money. And it was then that Che attacked Young with his fists. He then duct taped her eyes, her upper legs, and her ankles. He also taped her hands behind her back. During the struggle, Young was able to activate the 911 feature on her Apple Watch. She also sent a distress message to a pre-assigned list of people, which included her oldest child. Dispatch was listening to the Apple Watch 911 call, but since Young had been gagged by Che, all they really heard was muffled struggling. But the technology on the Apple Watch was able to alert the dispatch worker to the location of the call. Authorities did respond to Young's home, but they were too late. Che had already kidnapped his bound and gagged, soon-to-be ex-wife. Che drove to a heavily wooded area and prepared a hole in which he was going to place Young. He dug down about 19 inches and about 65 inches lengthwise. He drug his bound wife into the hole and shoved her down inside, but not before he stabbed her in the chest with a small knife. He then threw loose dirt over her and covered her body with a heavy tree. When investigators could not locate Young, a missing persons notification was sent to residents. And several hours later, after working the bindings, Young escaped the hole and began searching for anyone to help. She ran for nearly a half hour before she found a rural home. It was 1 a.m., and the frantic Young banged on the door until someone answered. Young was screaming and crying and was understandably terrified as she told the homeowner that her husband was trying to kill her. Unsure of what was happening, the homeowner left Young outside and went inside the home to call 911. When a deputy eventually arrived, he didn't find Young on the porch anymore. Traumatized by the last 12 hours, Young had fled and was hiding behind a shed on the property. As the deputy slowly approached Young and shined his flashlight on her, she became aware that it was law enforcement there to rescue her. Young sprinted towards the deputy, screaming that her husband was trying to kill her. Young still had duct tape wrapped around her neck and jaw and ankles. Soil stained her clothes, and it dirtied her hair. She quickly identified herself as the woman who had made that 911 call to police from her Apple Watch. And Young was also sure her husband and attacker was still in the woods. She was correct, because later that morning, a citizen was walking on a trail near the area where Young had been buried. There, that citizen found Che in his van, and he didn't look well. The citizen called the police, and just 20 minutes later, Che was arrested for first-degree attempted murder, first-degree kidnapping, and several charges of domestic violence. 2 days later, Che faced a judge alongside his public defender, and that attorney requested that his client be given bail of $150,000, since his client had never had any previous criminal convictions. Well, during that hearing, a victim statement was read where Young had written the following: "Please, no bail. I am really afraid for my life. I just want to emphasize that I fear him so much, and he will kill me again if he is out." Okay, let's just stop for a moment and analyze Young's word choice. I think subconsciously she believes she cheated death. English might not be her first language, but I believe that's why she chose that way of saying, "He'll try to kill me again." The experience was so traumatic that she identifies it as dying, and she will potentially die again if he gets near her. Well, the judge denied the bail request, and Che was held in jail for the next year until he finally chose to work a plea deal with the Thurston County District Attorney. As part of that plea agreement, Che submitted a statement to the court that read that he had taken substantial steps to cause death to his wife, Young Suk-on. He admitted to kidnapping her from her home, taking her to the woods, assaulting her, and placing her bound and gagged in a hole that he dug. He then wrote that he covered her in dirt, logs, and branches. Well, last week, the judge in the case sentenced Che to 165 months in prison and 3 years of community custody following his release. But the plea deal came with a significant reduction in charges. Instead of first-degree attempted murder, first-degree kidnapping, and a slew of other charges, he instead was sentenced for second-degree attempted murder and domestic violence. Part of the reduction of the charges were chalked up to the fact that Che had previously served as an intelligence warrant officer in the military, and he was discharged from that position with a 100% disability rating due to injuries and illnesses that were incurred during his service and deployment. The deputy prosecutors have met with Young several times over the last year and a half, and they told the judge last week that Young's physical injuries are nearly healed, but the trauma of the attack remains ever present. Deputy prosecuting attorney Elizabeth McMullen called Young a strong woman. Now, during the sentencing hearing, Che said he wishes he could go back to that day in October of 2022 and never even enter the house where he attacked Young. And Young told local media outlets following the sentencing that that day in October of her attack crushed her and her children's lives. She also said she has to live her life with emotional trauma and permanent health issues. All right, you guys, please never forget. And no, I will always be reminding you that you or someone you love can get help with domestic violence by visiting thehotline.org. All those calls and correspondence are confidential and free. Now to this crazy, and I'll be honest, slightly infuriating story out of the state of New York, where the DA from Monroe County clearly believes she doesn't need to obey the laws that she prosecutes. Last week, Monroe County District Attorney Sandra Dorley was driving home from work, and she was speeding. She was clocked doing 55 in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. When an officer pulled into traffic behind her, Sandra didn't pull over. She instead traveled another half mile to her home and pulled her car into her garage. And then she proceeded to berate the officer that was trying to enforce the law. Well, the city of Webster released the body cam footage of the attempted traffic stop. It's lengthy, but here, I want you guys to listen to the first 3 minutes, and I'm guessing you'll be a little infuriated too.
Sorry, I'm the DA. I was going 55 coming home from work.
55 and a 35.
I don't really care.
Okay.
So you can call Dennis.
Can you please come over here?
No.
This is on a traffic stop, ma'am.
Yes, it is. You can call Dennis. Nicole Meyer right now.
Okay, I'm telling you why I stopped you. You didn't stop at all. Did you not hear my lights or sirens or
No,
anything?
I didn't actually. I was on the phone.
Okay, well, you're not supposed to be on the phone while you're driving either.
Yes, I am with the hands-free. Absolutely.
Okay. Why are you so upset at me? I'm doing my job. You just admitted to me that you were going 55 and a 35 on Phillips Road.
Can you please tell him to leave me alone? It's
Officer Christopher. Can you stay over here, ma'am? This is a traffic. This is a legal traffic stop. Do you have your ID?
No, it's in my purse. Here.
You have your purse right there.
No, this is my lunch. Would you talk to Dennis? This is ridiculous. Just go away.
Hello, sir. Good, ma'am. Can you please stay at the back? This is a legal traffic stop. Can you please stay over here?
No. Hey, baby, get your little guy out of here.
Sir, I stopped her for going 55 and a 35 on Phillips Road.
On Phillips Road.
And
Coming
she
home from
failed
work.
to stop. She drove all the way back home and parked in her garage. And now she's not complying with any of my commands. Ma'am, do not go inside.
Oh my God.
Yep. All right. Ma'am, come outside. You can't just go inside. This is a traffic stop. Here's your phone back.
I understand the law better than you. Would you just
953. Can you have a supervisor come to the scene?
No. Get out of my fucking house. Here.
I don't know why you're acting like this towards me.
Because
Can you please go to the back of the vehicle?
I'm not going to. I'm home. Okay, 55.
I don't care if you got home. You were supposed to stop at Phillips Road when I pulled you over. When my lights were
I
initiated.
didn't know you were stopping me. There was lots of other people on the road.
I was right behind you.
Yeah? There were other people on the road too.
Okay, I was directly behind you.
I'm not dealing with you right now.
Can you please step over here?
I'm not going to.
What is the reason you're so against what I'm doing? I'm doing my job. You say you're a DA?
I am the DA.
Okay.
Okay, let me get you my badge. I am the DA of Monroe County.
I just don't understand the hostility towards me. I'm doing my job.
No, you're being an asshole.
How am I being an asshole?
I am the DA of Monroe County.
I understand
Yes,
that, but
I'm
that doesn't
coming
give
home
you
from work,
a right
and
to
I
go
was
55 and a 35. And you even admitted to me that you went 50. I understand
really
that,
care.
ma'am.
I don't really
understand
care.
that.
You know what? If you give me a traffic ticket, that's fine. I'm the one who prosecutes it, okay? Just go ahead and do it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just don't understand the hostility.
I
I understand you're coming home from work.
And half the time I was on the phone with Dennis telling him, why are you pulling me over?
You're not even supposed to be on the phone to begin with. You should
yes.
know that.
I'm hands-free? Absolutely.
Okay.
You should know the law.
Okay. If it is hands-free, that's great. But at the end of the day, you're going 55 and a 35. That's 20
Okay.
miles over the speed limit.
Okay, you know what? That's fine. You know what I've been dealing with all day? 3 murders in the city. And do you think I really care if I was going 20 miles over the speed limit?
Okay, I'm just doing my
I would
job.
get
If
in
you
front of
pulled,
the
if
thing.
you pulled over when you saw my lights, which obviously you did,
I thought you were going somewhere else because I thought no one would ever pull a black SUV if you ran my plates.
I
If
didn't run
had-
your plate. I just called your plate out, and then I'm following you because you're not stopping. So I had to take the air from dispatch.
Just please.
953. You can have the air back, by the way.
I wonder if I get pulled over by officers, if I can just say that I don't care when they want to enforce the law. While law enforcement was attempting to pull Sandra over, she made a call to the Webster police chief demanding that he instruct his officers to leave, but the chief didn't comply. And after a 25-minute back and forth, Sandra was cited for the traffic infraction. Well, on Saturday, all 9 members of the Rochester City Council signed a letter addressed to New York Attorney General Leticia James, asking her to investigate the conduct of Sandra Dorley. The letter states that the behavior of Sandra Dorley undermines the credibility and integrity of our justice system, and it also erodes public trust. They also note that the behavior of Sandra appears to violate the office's standards of ethics, accountability, and respect for the law. Sandra has only responded by saying she accepts the traffic citation. And let's end with HOV lanes, because you guys, Americans can make everything controversial. On Wednesday, April 24th, the California Highway Patrol's Santa Fe Springs office shared a social media post calling out one motorist who tried to pull a fast one. Here, let me just read their social media post. Here's how it goes. So folks have been asking, if I have a mannequin in the passenger seat, does that count as a second occupant in the vehicle? Trying to use the carpool lane with no one else in the car. That's got an exclamation point behind it. And the post goes on further to say, the answer is a simple no. Like this motorist found out, we've got to give it to them. The appearance of the mannequin is next level, but at the end of the day, plastic is plastic. Officer Kaplan made an enforcement stop on this vehicle for crossing solid double lines, only to realize the driver was the only occupant in the vehicle with their plastic friend. The goatee was sharp, just a little too sharp. The driver was subsequently issued a citation for multiple carpool violations. Remember to plan ahead, know your route of travel, and the general challenges of your drive to avoid being in a rush or tempted to push your luck. I love these local police social media pages. They are hilarious. And I have to agree, this is a pretty real-looking dummy in the car, especially if the only glance you get is as you drive by. But the motorist broke the law by crossing the double lines, which then led the officer to get face-to-face with the plastic passenger. Those in the comments section think the dummy looks a little bit like Snoop Dogg. And one other poster mentioned that he doesn't really see the problem here, since most people act fake anyway. Now, the driver of the car was cited for multiple carpool lane violations, but this got me thinking about HOV lanes. Back in 2019, Nevada Highway Patrol announced on their Twitter account that they had stopped a local funeral home hearse driving in the carpool lane. Now, the driver thought that the dead body in the back qualified as a passenger. Trooper Travis Smaka explained to the Reno Gazette-Journal that he initiated a traffic stop with a Chrysler Town & Country minivan on Interstate 15. When he approached the vehicle, he saw a man wearing a polo shirt with a funeral home logo on it, and that's when he realized the van was a hearse. As the trooper began speaking with the driver confirmed that he did have a passenger since there was a body in the back of the car. Trooper Smaka took a peek, and indeed there was a dead body strapped to a gurney in the back. The driver even verified he worked for the funeral home by showing the trooper a brochure for funeral services. Trooper Smaka took it all in stride and let the driver off with a warning. Now, the Nevada Highway Patrol told the Reno Gazette-Journal that the rules are the person in the vehicle needs to be able to occupy a seat and can't be in the cargo area. And that leads me to mention the movie Weekend at Bernie's. And if you're too young to remember this movie, look it up, because Bernie clearly could have sat in a seat as all of his friends took the dead guy around for the weekend. And then it also made me remember that when I was young, newly married, I worked in the emergency department of our local hospital. A family had been out visiting Yellowstone National Park, and they had Grandpa with them. Unfortunately, Grandpa was very old, and he ended up dying of natural causes on that trip. While his family was trying to decide how to get his body back to Boise, Idaho, the powers that be cleared the family to strap Grandpa in the back seat and head home. Arrangements had been made with a funeral home in their hometown, and they were expecting the family in about 4 hours. And then I had another story itching in the recesses of my brain, and I started digging, and I found this woman, Brandy Bouton, in Plano, Texas. She got pulled over for HOV violations, not once, but twice, for driving in the carpool lane without a passenger. Her excuse? She said she was 34 weeks pregnant, and that was her passenger. She said she was 34 weeks pregnant, and Brandy believed that her baby girl qualified as a second person in the car. Well, on the first stop, she and the officer went the rounds, and Brandy was eventually cited for an HOV traffic violation. And then, just a few weeks later, she did it again. Same stretch of road, same violation. When the very same officer approached her window, all he said to her was, "You again?" The officer then asked when she was having the baby, and she told him that she was being induced the next day. Brandy said the officer was friendly, but he ticketed her again. Each ticket could have cost Brandy $215. I did find that Brandy gave birth to a healthy baby girl, which means she now has a qualified passenger for the HOV lane. Well, that's your Monday episode of Rise and Crime. And for those that I had a chance to chat with at the Phoenix Murder with My Husband live show, thanks for talking and searching me out. I met so many sweet people who have their own true crime stories, and people who just need a companion on their commute or while cleaning the house or even just trying to unwind at night. Thanks for being a part of this with us. Please leave 5-star reviews if you're so inclined. They are greatly appreciated. And you can join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.